basketball team, both men and women's. One little tidbit for you: we're the only team in the lab that for the last 2 consecutive years has had both the men's and women's basketball teams make it to the Sweet 16. Only team in the country. So kudos to Coach Self and his squad, and Coach Hendrickson and her squad for making it to the Sweet 16. Congratulations, and rock chalk as we go to the next venture, and hopefully at the end of the day, we come back with a couple of championships to add to the trophy case. But I just want to wish them good luck on behalf of the football program and, of course, me personally. On that note, let's flip it over to football right here in the heart of basketball season. So, fair game. Go ahead.
Pat Lewandowski is filling in a big spot for Tanner. This offseason so far, how much progress have you seen from him?
Significant. I think that what we saw last year when we moved Pat from defense to offense, that he probably had the best feet of any of our linemen, including Tanner. He probably had always could get his lower body in position to do everything he took. But all the nuances and the idiosyncrasies that come with playing the position, he's gotten better and better. Like tying together your hands, hands with your feet is a whole different deal. But he's up significantly in weight, bordering right around that 290 and the 290 weight. And remember when we made this flip initially, he used about 260. So we're up 30 pounds. And it looks to me, and growing. It doesn't look like he's tabled off to where he could get to. And I always was pleased with his feet, but now he's becoming a much better football player.
That switch, can that help him? Just understand, because he's had that defensive mentality before. What a defensive player might do and how he'll respond to it.
Yeah, I think that it helps with aggressiveness, but really at the end of the day, that position is a unique position on the offensive line. The position that is on the blind side of your quarterback. So with a righty quarterback, the left tackle, I think to be able to be in position to pass block becomes even more significant than run blocking and everything else. And I think that his feet already put him in a position to be able to play there. I think now the more experience he gets to bet, he has a high ceiling that he isn't even close to yet. I think that he's just going to keep getting better and better.
I've heard you mention toughness, especially when you're talking about your offensive line and how you need to get better in that area. I mean, does Pat help you do that?
Well, I think what's happened, let's not just group Pat. Let's talk about the subject of toughness, first of all. I think that last year we improved our toughness on our offense because we became one-dimensional. Because, we weren't throwing the ball with any efficiency, and we were running it, and they knew we were running it, we became a much tougher football team. When people came in, they knew we were running it, we still ran it with efficiency. So that means we improved the toughness up front. And I think that now, as you have a change in the guard and different players coming in and out, you need to have guys with that mentality that, that you're not going to have a drop-off in that range, and then on top of it, you're going to get much better in pass production. And I think that Pat's one of the guys that could help us get there.
During spring break, when you had a chance to go back and reflect on the first 5 practices, what's kind of been the biggest thing that's jumped out to you?
Well, I think that, we gave them an awful lot of information in 5 days. So I think that the minimal number of mental mistakes was encouraging, because when you're giving them a lot of information, you're opening yourself up for a bunch of mental mistakes. Now, of course, we didn't move the people around very much. Today that changes some. So we do just the opposite. We open ourselves up for a whole bunch of mental mistakes. Because now when you start moving one guy from one position to another position, and you don't do it to try to outthink yourself, you do it because you think that that's how it's going to end up, or else you wouldn't end up doing that. Now, that's on the positive side. On the negative side, let's start on the defensive side of the ball. I think our defensive staff is spending an exorbitant amount of time trying to get people to finish plays, to run to the ball, to get all 11 guys running to the ball on every play. And I think that the term we use in a negative vein is loafs. Like if a defensive lineman says a ball's going all the way over there, he figures, well, I'll save my energy for this play and I'll worry about the next play. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to get much better at if we're going to get better as a defense, to get 11 guys running to the ball on every single play. And that was a defensive staff's idea. I have a little familiarity with that mentality, because back when I first got into college football, way back in the mid-'80s, I went to the University of South Carolina, and they were an undersized defense, playing in South Carolina that ran to the ball. They had a nickname called the Fire Ant Defense, and it was because they were swarming to the ball on every single play. And I think defensively, if your mentality is for everyone to be swarming to the football, then you always have a chance of being very successful on defense.
Do you chart the loafs?
Mm-hmm. Not only do we chart the loafs, but to end the next practice, they do up downs for every loaf. So let's say if the defensive team had 22 loafs, they circle up at the end of practice to the next day, and they do 22 up downs. That's after everything else is done already. So you make them do them when they're as tired as they could possibly be. You're trying to get them to decrease the number of loaves by not have them want to sit there and not only do the loaves, but we call the name with the loaf. So let's say it was Tate. And let's say he had 3 loaves the day before. So say, okay, Tate, up, down, Tate, up, down, Tate, up, down. So not only are they doing the up downs, but they're getting mad at Tate at the same time. So it kind of stresses the point.
Police each other.
I think they all get the picture. They all have to do it together because it's a team deal. So the whole defense does them together, but they're knowing who they're doing it for at the same time.
You had a really good running game last season, despite the 1-1 record. I mean, how exciting is it to be able to get all those guys back for this year?
It's comforting, because now you know about them. Last year you thought you knew about them, but now you kind of know what you have, and it gives you an opportunity to try to do some creative things when you have depth at a position with talent. We don't have very many positions where we have both depth and talent. We might have talent, or we might have depth, but to have depth and talent together, that is not, that's the makings of what good teams do. You look across the board, and they don't just have talent; they also have depth at those positions. We might have depth, we might have talent, but there's very few positions we have both, and that happens to be one position that we do.
How's Colin Spencer adjusting to college football in this short time?
It was interesting because in the very beginning it was like a chicken with his head cut off, But I think the game is starting to slow down for him because, he's a very quick, fast. His whole deal is his quickness and his strength. The kid's got like less than 2% body fat. I mean, it's. I don't know if they've charted anyone as low as him, to be perfectly honest with you. But his quickness is his deal, and when you have to think, then you don't play as quick. And as he's become more comfortable, you can see him playing more comfortable, and I think that he's continued to progress, and I think that by the end of the spring, what's going to end up happening is in August now, when we come in, he's going to be totally different than as if he would have just come in August originally. That's one of the big advantages if you do come mid-year as a high school kid, is going through spring ball, you're getting all the original kinks worked out early, so by the time training camp comes in, you could actually put yourself in a position to compete.
How about Monday morning? You were very loud about being excited.
I didn't say a word. I said on one little tweet that you happen to read.
But let's say proud then. How about that? About an early workout, welcome back type of thing.
Well, the first thing, you want them to come back, and, you know, with snow and everything like that, that's always a concern of yours, you know, right off the bat. So to get them back there and then get to that early morning workout, and, you know, that, you know, they knew it was coming. This was not like unannounced. You know, they knew that when they got back there that, you know, hey, look, I want guys to go to have a quality of life like any college kid, go have a spring break like everyone else. But we got business to attend to. And we're right in the middle of spring ball. And for those, there are a couple of guys that obviously didn't do a whole lot of work over spring ball. You know, kind of laid on the couch the whole time. And, you know, they were hitting the garbage cans a little earlier than some other people. You know, and, you know, it's very glaring that people, look at, if you go away somewhere and you're on a beach and you run on the beach every day, that's a good thing. As long as you're doing something to keep your, you know, keep yourself in shape. So it looks like most of them, you know, most of them put themselves in a pretty good position.
And you're-
Said, Jake and Michael are getting most of the reps at the quarterback spot. What have you seen?
All the reps.
What have you seen so far from them?
Well, I had mentioned, I had a little talk with Bob on this last night on that radio thing. You know, Jake's experience level, okay, puts him in a really good position to be way ahead of where he'd ever be if he just would walk in the door right now. You know, he has a high level understanding of the passing game. Now, Michael's level in the passing game isn't nearly at the same level. That doesn't mean Michael doesn't have the same arm, because they both have big arms. Jake has a big arm, and Michael has a big arm. Okay, but the thing is, his experience in the passing game isn't nearly as involved, and because we had to cut back last year significantly in the passing game because our inefficiencies or inadequacies, whatever you want to call them. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that he's getting for the first time right now that even though we had it in our system, we weren't exposing our team to because we obviously weren't ready for it. So they're both getting a heavy load, and I've been pleased with the progress.
With Jake, it seems like we've talked a lot about his intangibles, leadership qualities, but from a quarterback perspective, what does he need to work on?
Jake just needs to get out there. I mean, I think that he's got a lot of those qualities. Look, I know that last year everyone talked about Dane and how it turned out. It didn't turn out the way, you know, it all planned. Okay, so what we don't want to do is go put undue pressure on Jake walking in the door saying, you know, he's the savior. But at the same time, the expectation for Jake that I put on him won't nearly exceed the one that he puts on him. You know, he has a high expectation for himself, that's a good place to start. Because normally the problem I have is when I think my expectation is higher than the player's is. And that's not the case with him. You know, every time he makes a mistake, you know, he feels bad that he makes a mistake. If he doesn't hit a throw, he feels bad that he misses a throw. Because he's a very accurate passer.
He's listed as the number one guy. Would you characterize that as, I mean, is he the starting quarterback, or would you
I'd
characterize
say
it as
that
more of a competition?
he's the man to beat out. I put him first for a reason. If I thought he deserved to be second walking in right now, I'd put him second. And one of the obvious questions I would have to ask myself if I were sitting in your seat. Okay, you know, how could you put guys first ahead of guys who played last year? And my answer is we were 1-11 last year, and I'd prefer not to be 1-11 again. So if I think that those guys are better than the other guys, then I'm putting them ahead of them. And we have new guys coming in the summertime. And guess what? It's after the spring. If I think those guys are better than the guys that just practiced in the spring, I'm putting them ahead of them. Okay, because we have some players in here, you know, there's at least a half dozen on defense that have a chance of being on the field first play of the game when we play in September. I mean, when you're 1-11, you don't worry about being in love with anybody. You put the best guys out there, whoever they are, and you know, that's the only way you're going to get better.
in your second year as a head coach here, is there anything that you've done differently this offseason versus last offseason?
Well, I mean, last year I spent a lot of time, people talk about changing the culture. I don't call it changing the culture. I mean, cleaning out the program. And let's not all just say that all with negative, just all a negative vibe. Okay, but cleaning out the program meant top to bottom. And you don't want to be here, leave. I could care less whether you're here or not. I mean, either you're a Kansas guy or you're not a Kansas guy. Don't talk to me about depth chart. You want to talk to me about depth chart, go play better than the guy who's ahead of you. I mean, it's a very simple philosophy. You know, I have no sympathy. I'm totally unsympathetic to any player who wants to come in and talk about depth chart. I'm not interested. Don't bring it up. Go play better than the other guy and you'll go move ahead of him. But it wasn't that. You know, it was the expectation in the classroom, the expectation socially. You know, all the factors. I mean, we got rid of 29 guys. You think about it, 29 scholarship players, and a lot of them were guys that were really playing. When you're making that much of a commitment to wipe out the program, then obviously what you're trying to do is, okay, now we've done this, now where do we go from here? You know, and you know, as we do that, you always keep in mind the ultimate goal is for every one of your guys to graduate. Really, that's the ultimate goal. Now, while you're doing that, you want them to play football at a high enough level where we can improve the state of the union in Kansas football. Okay, that's why Holden Tharp is in school right now. He wanted to walk away. I wouldn't let him walk away. I said, you come back here and graduate. I mean, what good would it have done been here all that time and not graduate from school? It really defeats the whole purpose of coming. You have 100 guys or so, if 10 of them play it down in the NFL, you know, that's a high percentage. If 10% of them play, that would be a high percentage. So, you know, you have to be able to mix and match those things. But I think now, you know, we've gone through our 111, getting rid of the 29 guys, you know, changing the culture academically, you know, to where now that they know what my expectations are. Now they know me and I know them, you know, a whole lot better than we did at this time last year. And there's really no gray area anymore. It's all black and white. You know, it's this way or that way. You know, there's no, you know, well, how am I going to look at that? They know how I'm going to react. You ask me a question, what's my reaction going to be? They know what the reaction is going to be. There's no guessing game here.
You mentioned, you know, now that you're here, they do know your expectations. You kind of switched places the past few years since '09. How comforting is it to be able to be in the same place for 2 consecutive seasons? I
could have stayed in those places too. It just didn't work out that way. You know, I mean, you know, I didn't choose to leave Notre Dame. They chose that for me. I went to the Chiefs. My daughter had a bad experience. That's why we left there. And I went to Florida and I really had no intention of leaving there. And then, you know, after talking to Dr. Zenger a few times, I just felt that this was a place I want to be, and I want to be here for a long time. Now, if I want to be here for a long time, there's a lot of things that have to change. And one of them has to be, you better start winning more football games. So that'd be a good place for us to get to this year.
You said yesterday that Ben Goodman is a player on the rise. What has he done to kind of put himself in a position to...
First of all, he watched Josh Williams practice last year. Josh took him under his wing, okay, and it was like his puppy dog. And probably the best thing that Josh left us from last year was his work ethic. He was wonderful, and Ben was his guy. And Ben carried that over where, I mean, he goes full speed on every single play, just the way Josh did. And I think that's put him in a position where he already had some God-given ability. But now when you're going full speed on every play, you know, I told Josh that, and I called Josh right out in front of the team at the end of the year. I said, Ben Goodman's performance is because of you. Ben Goodman's going to be a player because of you. I said, so when you leave here, even though you're leaving a team that went 1-11, okay, Ben owes you a great debt because, that's why he's going to become a player.
What about Darius Willis? How's he progressed?
I'm very encouraged with Darius. Now, when I got here last spring, I'm going to talk negative and then talk positive on the same thing. I felt that he was one of those entitled guys that, thought, he was the leading tackler on a team that wasn't any good. So you're leading tackler on a team that isn't any good. All of a sudden, does that make you good? So he, instead of going up the depth chart, he started moving down the depth chart. And he eventually got buried where he wasn't going to play anymore. So he went over to the show team. Now, when you go over to the show team, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to go through the motions and become anonymous the rest of your career, or you're going to try to fight your way back. And he worked his butt off. And he worked his butt off in everything he did, where eventually I said, we got to bring him back up. We got to find something for him to do. So we put him as an outside player, to get some, because he has some fast twitch off the edge, and started turning him into somewhat of a pass rusher over there, playing him behind Tobin. Okay, and then just started to play some and got a little bit of production. Now we've tweaked what we're doing on defense. So you need a couple of bigger bodies in there at inside linebacker. Okay, so with the guys that we have playing, he's a little undersized for Buck. He's really not big enough for Buck, but he's plenty big enough to play as an inside linebacker. And to be honest with you, he's pushing Heaney. It's not a runaway with Heaney in first. I mean, he's pushing him. He's pushing him for playing time. It's been a nice competition, and I've been very, very pleased with Willis. Okay, he's one of those guys who very easily could have thrown in the towel and it could have been the 30th player that wasn't here. But he went in the other direction, and kudos to him, because that's why he is where he is right now.
Can you compare those two guys, Ben and Darius, and come with some of the things individually they do well compared to the other guy?
Well, Ben's a little smaller and a little quicker. He's a little smaller and a little quicker. They're both very physical players, and can take on the inside game that most teams will sprinkle in at you. They're both capable of doing that. Just Darius is a little bigger, a little bit slower, but also a little bit bigger.
Was that, he just discovered that himself, found it inside, and just realized what you have to do to be successful here, or did he have
When you're trying to run everyone out of here, because I would have gotten rid of 50. Okay, when you're trying to run everyone out of here, some guys come the other way. Now, they don't all have to be great players. I mean, Dexter Linton, for example, was a guy I had gone. Wasn't happy with how things were going, and he ended up playing a whole bunch last year. Why? Because he came around. So you always hear about the names of the guys that are gone, but you don't hear about the success stories about people who had one foot out the door and fought their way back, not only to be here, but to end up being productive. It's good stuff you guys are getting today.
You talked about the guys that are here and more coming. Has the competitiveness, I know it's only been 5, but has the competitiveness been to your liking this spring so far? Of the team as a whole?
Yeah, I think we have better competition in two aspects: offense against offense, and defense. Within your own depth chart, you have more competition, and then you also have more competition, offense and defense. Last year at this time, you and I could have started on the defensive line in the spring. I mean, it was in shambles, and that's not the case anymore. I mean, now you got players. Decent players going against decent players every day. It makes everybody better. So they have competition on their side of the ball, but then they also have competition when, much better competition when, the offense and defense are going against each other. Much better than it was at any time last year.
It might have been the last time we talked to you, but at the end, you talked about those guys that were coming back and had already been here, and they see their names below those newcomers on the depth chart. You said That should be a clear sign to them. How have those guys, not, individually, but collectively responded to that?
First of all, one big difference between me and you is I don't care. You do. I don't care one bit how they feel. How's he gonna feel? I don't care. I really don't care how they feel.
You care how they respond.
That's how I care how they
Yeah.
respond. I don't care how they feel. It doesn't make one bit of difference to me. I mean, if you're a football coach and you're worried about people's feelings, I mean, you're not gonna hang around in this business very long, so obviously there's guys that move down the depth chart and there's guys that move up the depth chart. We talked about Willis. There's a perfect example.
Right.
I mean, he's moving up. He's not moving down. Okay, he might be two, and he got reps some last week at one. I mean, so there's guys that move both ways. I learned a long time ago a very simple phrase: go by what you see. Go by what you see. And that's a coaching phrase saying, just watch what happens and play them based off of what you see. Don't play players based off of reputation. Go by what you see. And I think that as long as you live by that, you'll be okay.
How do you feel about the receiver position so far?
I think that there's at least a couple players that I've been very pleased with, okay? And I'll cite them, okay? I know that a couple people have seen Christian Matthews on the two deep. He's been running first team now for the whole last week. I mean, Christian Matthews has been the most pleasant surprise of anyone. And I was hoping Justin McKay would move up into that realm, and he's moved up into that realm too. So those guys who are running twos have now been running a lot of ones. So those two guys who could have evaluated Christian Matthews as a receiver last year? His claim to fame was Wildcat quarterback. That's what anyone knows about Christian Matthews. Okay, but right now, if we were playing a game today, he would start it. He would start at wide receiver. And so would McKay if we were playing today. All right, so there are two guys. One was on the show team, and the other guy was wallowing away in anonymity. Okay, so now they're both factors. And remember now, there's a number of guys coming in at that position. When we talked about defense having a half dozen, that's the one position on offense where there's a number of players coming in that could get into this mix in a hurry. So some of these guys better state their claim right now, because I want to find out what those guys can do once they get here, right? I'm not going to sit there and put them on the bench and not put them out there and see whether or not I think they're better or not. Everyone's going to be second guessing me again when you see their names on the depth chart ahead of some of the guys that are here. But the guys are here. This is their time now. There are 5 practices in. They got 10 to go. Okay, they do it. Now's the time where they can move. They can position themselves based off of their performance.